How long are you going to do van life? When are you going to settle down, get a house, a normal job, and have a family? This is a question I regularly get from friends and family, and even more often online. And I've never really thought much about the answer, but now here I am, moving out of the van that I've called home for over 4 years. Since I've decided to sell my van, I've heard from many other friends that they are also selling their van or quitting van life. And I feel like every time I go online, I see another person who's selling their van, quitting van life, or getting off the road. So I thought it was time to address the question that I've been seeing all over the internet: is van life dying? In the United States, the history of van life can be traced back to the 1920s, but it wasn't the movement it is today, where people are spending tens of thousands of dollars on a van that's built out to basically resemble a studio apartment. These old mobile homes weren't necessarily luxurious, but they fulfilled the needs of this counterculture that was emerging. People who were questioning and rejecting the social norms began living in mobile homes. And this movement gained even more popularity in the 60s and 70s with the hippie movement. But even though van life was around decades ago, it still wasn't that popular when I bought my van 5 years ago. I remember buying my van and having to explain to everyone in my life what my plan was with it, and they were all so confused. At the time, no one had heard of van life, and I hadn't met anyone who lived in a van. But then there was the COVID pandemic, and the world went into lockdown.
China has identified the cause of the
mysterious new virus.
Coronavirus.
Coronavirus.
There are fears a rapidly spreading virus has reached Australia.
This is a rapidly emerging situation where there is not a cause for alarm.
The first U.S. case has been detected.
I myself was in the Utah desert in the middle of nowhere, hundreds of miles from the nearest city. So I've been digging for about 2 hours. I am so muddy, as you can tell. Honestly, I don't even know how I'm gonna address this. Like, if I'm gonna wash it off, and like my hair's muddy, so I'm probably gonna have to wash that in my sink. While my friends and family were isolated in their houses, I was going on remote hikes, laying in the sunshine by the river, and living my life pretty normally, except for being surrounded by people, of course. I think at that time, everyone was craving nature and stimulation, and it really contributed to amplifying this trend of van life. People began buying and renovating vans, and then they could travel the country, spend time in nature, not worry about paying rent, and have more time for their hobbies. But things are changing, as they always do, and these are the reasons why I think so many people are quitting van life right now. The first reason why I think a lot of people are quitting van life is because of burnout. And I'm not just talking about any burnout, I'm specifically talking about travel burnout. I feel like people oftentimes get vacation with traveling confused. So when they think of travel or van life, they think of it as this relaxing break from work. And while vacation is that, traveling, especially full-time traveling, is not. If I'm being completely honest, I myself have faced burnout many times on the road. And I think that's because of something called decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is when we run out of energy because we've had to make too many decisions in a day. We have limited energy to make decisions, which is why people like Steve Jobs decide to wear the exact same shirt every day, because they think if they can eliminate that decision, then they have more energy to make other decisions. In van life, you have a lot of decisions to make. You have to figure out where you're going to park every night. You need to fill up your water jug, dump your pee tank, dump your shit. It's really disgusting. This is hands down the grossest job in van life. A lot of times you'll arrive at a campsite and then realize that online it was inaccurate and the campsite actually isn't open. So you have to go find another campsite. And you need to decide where you want to travel to. The country is so big and there's so many possibilities and so many beautiful things to see. So there's all these decisions you have to make when traveling just to even survive, just to have a nice place to sleep at night or to have water in your water tank. So it can get pretty overwhelming.
This week going climbing was one of the best moments of my
van life. And so it does feel like wrong to also be feeling burnt out and homesick, trying my best to combat it and do things that make me happy and stuff, but ultimately I'm just really excited to go home.
Second reason why I think people are quitting van life is because of breakdowns. And speaking of breakdowns, I actually need to replace this mirror, so let's do it. There's a spider on there. Go, friend, go. This isn't your home anymore, I'm sorry. In van life, it's just inevitable that things are going to go wrong and break. Whether it's something like this, or sometimes you'll have actual mechanical issues in your van. Whenever that car is your home, it's very scary. I fixed it. That was pretty easy, but not every task is that easy. I actually got rear-ended by a semi-truck, and so I couldn't open my back doors for a couple months on the road, and it really impacted my quality of life those 2 months, and I couldn't imagine something worse happening. And then being in the middle of nowhere where you don't know anyone and it's a new place, like, that's all really scary, and the possibility of that happening puts you in a really vulnerable position. I don't necessarily think that breakdowns are like the main reason that people get off the road, but I definitely think that if people face a lot of problems in their build or mechanical issues with their van, it can eventually lead to a lot of negative feelings about being on the road, which could prompt someone to get off the road, I think. It's just my luck that basically right before I sell my van, this LCD screen went bad. Thankfully though, I think it'll be a pretty easy fix. As van life becomes more popular, it also becomes more criminalized, unfortunately. Every time I go to a big city, there's inevitably going to be a million no overnight parking signs. And I've gotten multiple like $200 parking tickets, gotten the knock many times from cops, even when there is no overnight parking sign. We just got woken up in one of the worst ways. It's like 9 a.m. right now, and these two rangers knocked on my van with so much aggression. 90% of the time I encounter a police or ranger, they make me feel so bad. A lot of major cities just don't like van lifers and they don't want them there, so they're going to make van lifers' lives as hard as possible until they leave the city, basically. And for me, it's worked. Like, I don't like being in cities for that reason, but there are some people that unfortunately can't afford to travel and spend all that gas and are maybe living out of a van more for necessity. There's no real point in complaining too much about it because I don't see that changing, but that does make van life a lot more difficult. Now that I've done the LCD screen, it is time to fully move out of my van. I already got rid of all the clothes, but I still have some stuff in here, so I brought 2 extra boxes, and that brings me to the next reason why I think a lot of people are quitting van life, which is judgment. Living in a van is just naturally a pretty alternative lifestyle, so people have a lot of divided opinions. You are going to have people that judge you in a good way and they really admire the way you live. There's also people that really don't and they hate the way you live, and you'd be surprised how passionate people are about it. They're actually very passionate. I actually had a friend who, this lady started screaming and cussing at her to get a job, which she did have a job. She actually worked at a local surf shop in that city, but that girl just made a lot of assumptions and told her to get a job and go back to where she came from, which she was also local to the area. It does wear on you to always feel unwelcomed wherever you go. And I understand why people don't like van lifers. Like, maybe if I lived in a house, I would understand that more. But people can be really mean, and I just feel like that is hard to deal with.
Running through your mind, you keep me in your pocket. It's so typical.
I finished cleaning cleaning out the van. This is the second time I've moved out of this van in the last few months, and the second time I will be painting this van. So the next step is to prep everything to paint. So I'm gonna just wipe down all the surfaces and countertops and everything. So when I moved into my van, I did not have any way to make money. I did have savings, which, gosh, I don't know what I would have done without them, but I still didn't have that much savings. Contrary to popular belief, not every van lifer is a trust fund baby. I certainly was not. So I wasn't just getting an allowance from my parents that I could rely on, and it did make me really stressed out at times. Even though it's definitely possible and there's a wide variety of jobs you can have on the road, it definitely does limit you to remote work. Or of course you could work in one spot and be stable, but that to me kind of defeats the purpose of van life a little bit. At least for me, I do it primarily for traveling, but people do it for all different types of reasons, and a lot of people do it to save money. That's a really valid reason to live in a van as well, because rent is so expensive. I have had many jobs myself being on the road, from working at a farm to babysitting and nannying. I've also made and sold my wire wraps with crystals that I've mined myself in different forests. And as a lot of you guys know, my full-time job now is content creation, videography, photography. And throughout my journey, I've met so many people who live on the road who do all different types of jobs, from travel nursing. I've met people who work remote in like software or build things. They're carpenters. And it's really cool to see that people from all different walks of life can be living in this lifestyle, but it's not necessarily easy, I wouldn't say, to figure it out at first. If you aren't making money for so long on the road and you haven't been able to find a job that works for you, that you love, I feel like that is a reason why people quit van life. Well, I have a lot more to paint, so I'm gonna move this. That way I don't get stuff on my bed.
I look back to the past. I was searching for something forgotten. Then I found a key, more like a map, a glimpse of the future running through the past.
One of the last things I need to do before I sell this van is wash and wax it. So that's what we're gonna do. Washing and waxing this van is one of the last things I need to do still before I sell it. Community is one of the reasons why I love van life, but there is a major downside to it, and it's the fact that it's a very transient community. You could travel with someone for a couple months and become family because you spend every day with them, and then shortly after that they may be on the other side of the world and you might not see them for a few months. When you live in a city or you're just held down in one place, then you end up developing this really stable community around you. You have friends and maybe family that are, for the most part, consistently there, and I think for a lot of people that this lack of a very stable community that's always around you can get really hard. There are also long periods of time where you're traveling solo, and while I think that can lead to so much self-discovery, and I'm such a big fan of spending time alone, if you do it for too long, it can get really lonely. I mean, humans are social creatures, so it can definitely wear on you to always be alone in the middle of nowhere in places that you're not very comfortable.
star song, floating, always glowing, how the heart calls. I am way less blameless free. I am craving. It's a hard call. It's a star.
I decided to also clean the tires and some of the plastic parts around the van since those got a little dirty while I was washing it. And now after a long week of working on the van, I'm finally done with all the van projects. The van is for sale if you're interested in buying it. I've included the link in the description. And I'm just taking some time here at this really beautiful spot in Austin right by the water just to be in nature and relax finally. I think there's another reason that I haven't mentioned as to why so many people are quitting van life. I think a lot of people are selling their vans and opting for more unconventional vehicles like an ambulance or a box truck or a truck trailer or a school bus. This is my friend Rachel, and she just recently bought this bus to live in. So I wanted to ask you, why did you choose bus life versus van life?
I guess a few reasons. I heard that they typically were cheaper than like the vans. I was going for something more mechanically reliable, so I didn't want like a clunker $3,000 bus and something that was going to cost a lot in expenses and maintenance. So I got this bus mainly for the space. Like the van has a lot of space too, but it feels like the bus would have more space, and I wanted to be like super comfortable. I wanted a big fridge and an oven and all that. So I think it was mainly for space and then also to save a little bit on the actual vehicle.
It feels so much bigger. I'm like, oh my God, this is a mansion every minute.
People say it feels like an apartment, but it drives, to me, it drives like a big van. You'll see what it drives like. It doesn't feel that huge to me. It feels like a big van. Yeah. But sometimes it is tight in certain spaces. Yeah. Some people know that about
I've actually considered living in an alternative vehicle like a school bus myself, but I've actually bought another van. So after I sell this van, I'm going to be renovating this next one. Van life is not over for me because even though this lifestyle has brought a lot of negatives, it's brought far more positives. Yes, I've experienced travel burnout, but that's only because I've experienced so many new things, met so many new people, and gotten out of my comfort zone. I've had things break down in the van, but that's also taught me how to be self-sufficient, and I've learned so much about building things throughout the process. I've been treated like a criminal and been judged, but I've learned that miserable people will always try to make you miserable. I've learned how to stay kind regardless, protect my energy, and how to move forward. I've struggled to find a remote job, but throughout the process, I've learned the value of money. I've learned how to live on an extreme budget, how to find little odd jobs, and how to pursue my dreams relentlessly. I've felt the loss of community and been lonely at times, but I've learned so much about myself in the process. I've learned what consumes my thoughts, what pokes at my triggers, and what I'm afraid of. Van life may have downsides, but I truly don't believe it's going anywhere. Whether you live in a box truck, an ambulance, or a school bus, to me it's still all the same nomadic community, and I believe there's no greater joy in life than seeing the world that we live on. To live in alignment with the seasons, to foster a like-minded community, and to live among nature.